Sports is about winning. Seeding is about rankings.
They're now up to 2-2, but most importantly, 1-1 in league play.
From football to basketball, volleyball to wrestling, track and field, baseball, soccer, golf, and softball.
I could see him dropping 15 or 16 to avoid league matchups.
Blecha-Tology does the math so you don't have to.
I look at them and I say, if things go right for them this year, they're going to stay.
Now, the master of mathematics, Ben Blecha.
Well, welcome into Blecha-Tology for volleyball on a Blecha-Tology week across the Eastern Plains Sports Network. I'm Ben Blecha. Of course, if you're not familiar with Blecha-Tology, presented by Agricultural Accounting, over the last couple of years, we've taken the opportunity here at the Eastern Plains Sports Network to put together a grading system for each of our schools within the season and give them a familiar school letter grade. And we'll continue to do that throughout this year. But part of what we do with Blecha-Tology coming into the season is talk about the returning factors for each of our schools. And of course, you know, if you followed along with the Eastern Plains Sports Network, that I'm a huge 1A volleyball fan. I am one that obviously is tied into the 1A volleyball community. My wife is the coach at Kalichi, and I have a child that plays as well. But that is part of why we created Blecha-Tology and really started using it last year, was because Blecha-Tology is solely based on numbers. It does not take into any bias factor whatsoever, any past history of, well, you're the 4 champs over the last 8 years. It's all about what's on paper and what's in front of you. That's what Blecha-Tology is all about. And as we head into a new season, it's really interesting in 1A volleyball, and that's what we're starting with here, is 1A volleyball for the volleyball side of things. We'll break down 2A and then the Patriot League, which is now a 2A, 3A, 4A league as well, a little bit later on in this Blecha-Tology week, because there's movement on these even-numbered years. 2026-28 is the new cycle. Over the next 2 school years, the schools that are in their classifications will be in that classification based on the enrollments that they have with the Colorado High School Activities Association. And 1A volleyball's in quite a bit of flux because you have some teams that were impacted by some of the new rules from the Legislative and Oversight Committee with the private schools having to count 150% of their enrollment, and then some enrollments, this 1A and 2A, those schools that kind of sit 90 to 110, one class can sway you one way or the other. A couple classes in a row will really jump you or drop you in the overall ranking. So let's look at 1A volleyball and a look at the heading into fall of 2026 thoughts. So let's look back to 2025. 6 teams make Saturday. That at Blecha-Tology is what we call the Saturday 6. If you're playing on the last day of this season, you are a Saturday 6 team. In 1A last year, Fleming won the state championship. McClave's the runner-up. They're both back this year and in Class 1A. The other 2 teams that were semifinalists, Marino and Flatirons Academy, are now 2A teams. Marino because of enrollment, Flatirons because of the 150% play-up capacity. The remaining 2 teams that were Saturday morning teams that were ousted in the Saturday morning action, Kalichi and Sargent, remain in Class 1A. And then the 2 teams, the defending state champs out of Class 2A, Simla, and Swink, who was a Saturday morning, Saturday 6 team in 2A, they dropped down to 1A because of enrollment in their schools. So you lose 2, but you gain 2. And this classification, 1A volleyball, as we head into 2026, they're going to have 2 defending state champs to start the year. Simla, who won the 2A title last year, and Fleming, who is the 1A defending state champs. Additionally, 6 other state qualifiers made the tournament, with 12 teams in the tournament. ECA in Class 1A last year, they had to bump up to a Class 2A team because of the 150% enrollment. Prairie Grenada, they both got knocked out on Friday night. Stratton, High Plains, and Plateau Valley, the other schools, they went 0-2 at the state volleyball tournament, but did make the state tournament. So 5 of the other 6 state qualifiers in 1A last year are back again this year. So let's focus on the top 30. That's what we do in Blecha-Tology to start the year. We look at the top 30, especially in the 1A classification where only 24 make postseason. You don't really see anybody that was outside of the top 30 the previous year make a move up the following year into contention. They may be battling for that 24 if they were like 32, 33, 34, whatever the case may be, but they're not going to be a team that you don't have these big jumps. You have graduated jumps. If you were outside the top 30, you're going to work to get yourself toward that top 24. If you were at 24, you're trying to progress yourselves up. You don't really see much more than about 10 spots of movement in the rankings, and with Max Preps being the sole ranking factor coming into this school year, there's no longer a seeding and selection index. The sole ranking factor is Max Preps. That definitely takes a lot of graduated movement there. So with the top 30 at the end of 2025, across Class 1A, the average team is returning 59% of your production. And we track everything for Blecha-Tology, from kills per set to assists per set, blocks, digs, serving, receive errors, all of that. The production towards your total points, 59% is the average among the top 30 from 2025. Of those top 30, 13 of them return 60% or more. Only 4 of the state qualifiers, though, when you factor those teams that are coming in. Remember, Simla and Sargent, they were 2A state qualifiers last year, 1A state qualifiers this year. So they are among the group. Only 4 teams that qualified for state last year returned 2/3 of their production or more. Simla, the defending 2A state champs, and Sargent, who also drops down from 2A. Then Grenada and High Plains are the 4 teams that return 67% or more. That's a good platform for you to build on. Those teams that are sitting at 67% or higher in their return rate, you feel like you're going to do something this year. 60%, you're pretty comfortable on that baseline as well for the return rate. But rolling it back, I would say that 50% is one that you feel like we can work with that. If you're a coach, if you're a parent, if you're a fan of one of these schools and you've got 50% of your production back, that's something we can work with coming into the year. So when you roll that 50% return rate back, 5 more teams enter into the fold as teams that I feel like have a good floor coming into this season. That's McClave, Swink, Caliche, Plateau Valley, and Otis. Those schools are the ones that you feel like, okay, they're on a decent floor that are there. Now we have a points scored per set metric on Blecha-Tology that we talk about all the time. This combines a thought process, and this came from the University of Wisconsin and has been used quite readily in the collegiate ranks, and we've tried to apply it to the high school ranks. Your kills per set, how many kills you're scoring of your own accord, how many blocks you're turning down thanks to your defense, that's an immediate scoring point there, and then how many aces that are there as well. And then when you factor in digs, when you take the baseball sabermetric math that they utilize with round ball hitting round bat, you go oblong arm, round ball. I took some time and figured out kind of some of the mathematical differences, round ball hitting round bat versus oblong arm hitting round ball. And about 1 out of every 4 swings, you are going to have what would be considered a miss hit in volleyball. So to factor that in, if you are a team that gets 4 digs, by math, which is what Blecha-Tology is based on, you are going to get yourself 1 point because of a hitting error. So that tenacious backline play, and this is something we see scored an awful lot at these lower classifications, 1A and 2A, that tenacious backline play is going to create some miss hits on that. And when you factor all of those in, a quarter of your digs, a quarter of a point for a dig, your blocks, your aces, and your kills, quality teams in high school volleyball score 15 points per set, and those state championship teams last year were getting themselves up into the 17 and 18 range, and Simla was above the 18 points per set range of earning their own points. You're going to have some natural miscues from your opponents, service errors, blocking errors, rotation errors, ball handling errors, less likely ball handling errors now with lack of 2-hit violation, but you want to get to that point to where 2/3 or even a little bit better than 70% of your points are scored of your own accord, so you're not reliant on your opponent's miscues. So quality teams score 15 points a set, but early in the season, you are going to get more miscues. So I think the good baseline to sit that at right now is if you're returning 10 or more points a set, I think you're in a pretty good spot there. So taking that 10 points per set scored returning, the 10 earned points per set, the EP score that we have in Blecha-Tology, 6 of the top 30 teams in 1A volleyball last year have, the 60% or more. Only 4 of those state qualifiers return 10 points per game or more. That's Simla, Grenada, and High Plains among those bunches that come into the factor, with that 10 points per game per set that were state qualifiers. And then you factor in a few more teams beyond that with what they're returning when you have, that factor. And when you kind of say, okay, if you're at 8, if you're halfway to that plateau of 15, where you want to be, then you're going to throw 11 more teams into the mix. McClave, Swink, Sargent, Prairie, Plateau Valley, Eads, Flagler, Chirac, Elbert, Nucla, and even Pete's is a part of this bunch. So there's a lot of moving pieces, we still don't exactly know what's going on, but you feel like you're in a pretty good floor for many of these teams that we've talked about right now. So coming into this season, I think you can group 1A volleyball in Blecha-Tology to a couple of clear groups. I think there's really 4 clear groups. The first group being, to me, what is a clear top 3. And these are teams that it is Saturday 6 or bust for them. I'm not saying that even just getting to state, you aren't going to be happy, because I think there's those graduated steps you need to do. But for all of these teams, you want to be playing Saturday and you have a legitimate shot at a championship on paper. That's Simla, McClave, and Grenada. Simla being the defending state champs with 89% of their production back, 15.5 points per set back. They have Carly Cox and Brinley Ament, a senior and a sophomore, both with more than 3 kills a set last year. There's really not a weakness on paper for the Simla Cubs coming into this season. McClave, you have a little bit of a slip there. Aubrielle Gomez graduating, that's big. She's just that good. But she wasn't their leading attacker last year. I don't think that if you didn't watch McClave on a regular basis, you remember, because she was so good at the state volleyball tournament. But Aubrey Hempel was actually the number 1 attacker across the entire season for McClave back here. And you bring back your setter in Yezi Almanza. You've got plenty of other weapons that can make amends. And then you add in Cashley Randall, who was at Akron last year. Family moved to McClave. She's now a Cardinal, and really that opens up an awful lot of different options. So the paper for McClave is very, very strong, even with the graduation of Gomez. And then Grenada from that same area in southeast Colorado. Last year, their best hitter was a freshman in Cameron Coleman. They returned their setter, Kinsley Williams, who's over 1,500 career assists. That's a 1-2 combo you really can't ignore. This is a team that is that good. But in 1A volleyball, you need a second high-end hitter. That's what got them at state last year, was they didn't have that consistent second high-end hitter. They'd have one for a set here, and then somebody would adjust and make it there. They need to develop that second one, and from what I've seen this summer, Grenada's had a very good summer. Now, the Tier 2, we're going to focus more on the Eastern Plains Sports Network teams. We have 30 schools that we cover on the Eastern Plains Sports Network, and those schools that are in Tier 2 for the volleyball. That's Fleming, Caliche, Prairie, and High Plains. Now, Tier 2 for me is you should be going to state. Your upper end is getting to Saturday with hopes of winning a state championship. Your lower end, and when you start getting disappointment, is going to be, we didn't get to host a regional. These are teams that I feel are very solid inside the top 12. Fleming, yes, they graduated a lot. Ashley Bornoff was their leading attacker and blocker. Sienna Lewisberg was their number 2 attacker and one of their setters. Quincy Stull, she was that utility knife. Brooke Schaefer, the libero. They're all graduated. It was a massive class for the Fleming Wildcats, but history says Fleming reloads. Hadley Stull, Haley Chamberlain, they have the pedigree. They performed last year. They were part of the regular rotation. The bigger question for me is coaching. They have a new head coach, always been their strength. How does all of that play out? I've seen them this summer. They've got the pieces, but early on in the season, their schedule is exceptionally tough. So the question for me is how Fleming handles the early part of the season, but their history says they cannot be any lower than Tier 2 to start the season because this team reloads, they don't rebuild. Caliche, great run last year. They're trying to prove this year that it wasn't a one-off. You graduated Ryan Svoboda and Hallie Lewis. They were the 1-2 punch for the Caliche Buffaloes. And that's a hit that you feel on paper. When you lose your top 2 hits, that's definitely there. But when you look at that Caliche Buffalo team, half their total production returns in all facets because they only had 5 total upperclassmen on the roster last year. The 3 that they graduated in the senior class and 2 juniors last year. So they only have 2 seniors and then a junior class that brings an awful lot back. This team has the young pieces, and again, with a very tough schedule, they have 9 games in the first 18 days of the season. How that team responds to that challenge early on in the season, I think will determine where the Caliche Buffaloes fall. Prairie, they belong in this bunch as well after getting to state because you potentially have the Abriel Gomez of the class on your roster this year in Hannah Kugler. She's got 718 kills for her career. She's got 139 blocks for her career. She's got 579 digs for her career. That alone enough will carry this Prairie team. The question I have for them is the support beyond that. Nicole Ludgate, she had 1,000 assists last year. You graduated your setter. Tana Bailey was your actually number 1 blocker, better than Hannah Kugler, and the number 2 attacker. She graduated as well. So how are you going to work with that? The depth, that's the question mark. And you've got a new head coach here, although Jenny Nelson, she won a state championship at Caliche back in 2000. She's definitely got the pedigree to be very successful. And then High Plains is another team that I really think is solidly in this number 2. Cambria Seaman, Brianna Reed, both juniors, they return. Likely they'll get an addition of Addison Richards, who was at Idalia when they were at state early in her career. She missed last year because of medical reasons, and they moved to the High Plains community. So this team's going to be dangerous. My question is the setter position. Alexis Harvey graduating. How does that work out? And how can High Plains work with that? There's a couple teams that I think fall in our dark horse tier for Blecha-Tology as well across the area. Flagler, Otis, Stratton. Flagler, they were bounced by Prairie in the regional round last year, but they bring back the bulk of their roster. And when you've got a Riley Berry and a Sydney Berry to carry your team, I think you feel really good. Plus, they made the exceptional run in girls basketball last year to the championship game to be runners-up in Class 1A. So that kind of thing, winning begets winning. And I think Flagler can be there. They were one of the deepest rosters in the classification. So replacing Lexi Witt, who was the number 2 setter last year and the 3rd attacker on this team in a 6-2 offense, how does that work in? You've got plenty of pieces to do that. Otis, injury derailed what looked like a state qualifying team last year. But the injury to Aiden Tribblehorn last year gave real-time experience to Packer and Willicke and Jewell and Gross. You know, you really got some experience there. You need a new setter. Goebel graduated. You need a new libero. Reynolds graduated. But this is kind of another one that I think those pieces and the experience they got last year should be good for Otis as we come in. And then Stratton, I hate to put any team coached by Penny Eisenbart in a dark horse category, but they have to be here. I mean, one of the best coaches in this state's history is Penny Eisenbart, but when you lose Sophia Eisenbart, who was the driving force behind your success last year, what are you going to get out of them? You still get Brockton Bob back. You have plenty of other depth. They got lots of experience last season. You know they're going to be well coached. I think this is a team that definitely could knock on that top 12. Now, there's a couple teams as well in this classification that to me go from off the radar to on the radar. Haxton is a team that is dropping down from Class 2A. They are now a 1A team. They qualified for the regionals in 2A last year. They return to what I feel is their more natural classification. They've been a mainstay in the postseason for several years. When they were in 1A, they were here at the state tournament, but you lost Josie Freeman, Katie Cody, Emma Henry, Reagan Jones, Lily Lemonsani. That's a huge hit. The thing that keeps me, though, with them as an on-radar team to be a top 24, a lot of people forget they lost a lot of freshmen to injuries early last year, or even before the start of the season, that I think will make them much better when they come in again. I've seen them this summer. They look very good. As these players come back from their surgeries and their injuries, they're just going to get better and better. And then Pete's, they were the number 28 team in the Max Preps rankings to end last season. And they bring back 86% of their production, 9 points per set returning, and they have a freshman class that I've watched grow through the junior high ranks that is that's going to be exceptional. And they're from a lot of Bulldog names. There are Pete's names that are coming in. So I think this Pete's team is another top 24 that are there as well. So with Max Preps being the driving force behind the rankings this year, it's going to be interesting, to look at how we sit to start the season. I think that our area teams in that 25 to 16 range are teams like Pete's and Haxton that should be fighting to get into the postseason. I don't know that this is a team, any of these are teams that are going to be in the hosting end of things. The hosting bubble for our area, I think Otis is there, Stratton, Flagler, Prairie. Fleming probably falls toward the bubble just because of the lack of experience, but I think they're pretty solid inside that top 12. Those schools for the Eastern Plains Sports Network are kind of in that hosting bubble 15 to 8 range. 7 to 4 is where I say hosting is the floor, Saturday is the ceiling for these schools, and that is Caliche and High Plains going with Swink and Sargent as well. I think Fleming could make a case for being in here. Caliche could probably fall back to the hosting bubble. Same with High Plains. I think that you've kind of got that mix and match there, but that's where I ranked them on our Blecha-Tology early in the season. And then we said at the beginning, the top 3, Grenada, McClave, and Simla. Simla is the defending 2A state champs. I always say the champs are the champs until the champs are beat. Well, the champs in 2A, Simla, beat Fleming, the defending champs in 1A last year. So that's why, for me, Simla is the number 1 team in our Blecha-Tology. That's a wrap on our 1A volleyball Blecha-Tology. We've still got plenty more Blecha-Tology coming up this week. It's all presented by Agricultural Accounting. I'm Ben Blecha.